This episode this week is really special. I hope I'm not blown out, but we're going to do this anyway. It's such a gorgeous day in Portland. Like, that's the Portland Welcome to Old Town sign right there. I just had to show you. Katie Tucker is a hero of mine whose work I've been following for over a decade. And the way that they use design thinking, the way they use research, and the way that they build cross functional teams, and even more importantly, they get really different groups of stakeholders to align and build innovative practice at some of the largest places that you might not assume are that innovative or quick moving or thinking and working in this sort of way with iterative design thinking, testing, learning, sharing back, and like improving products. But that's who we have on the show today. We've got Katie Tucker on the show, Global Customer Research and CX Insights Manager for GM. She works in the customer organization at the heart of research, data, AI, and using innovation to impact a customer's journey, help them along their way. They've got a team that does it at every stage of the customer journey. It's such a fascinating organization, and the story, I think, is going to really get your attention. Katie dives, right? Her whole thing is about how you blend qualitative and quantitative insights to really figure out how to make a difference in the customer's journey and in the purchase lifecycle for General Motors. This is influencing near-term decisions as well as long-term strategic planning and understanding of like who our customer is, what they need, and how we can support them with it. She shares this amazing research study where they took an EV on a cross-country road trip and really learned what drivers are looking for, and learned how different a high-stress, long trip can be compared to inner city driving when you're using an electronic vehicle. Katie shares the details of her long and winding career path, which is really quite impressive if you dive into the details of it, and shares how cross-functional collaboration, this idea that like the people that help build your next innovation will protect it and help you implement it when it is time to go with it. She talks about how she uses data to bring executives and other teams on board, and how AI is changing and automating and empowering her team in new ways. This is one of those episodes that proves you should absolutely talk with your heroes because they might just impress the socks off of you. I've had the honor to watch Katie Tucker's work for years, and I'm so glad that you have a chance to see it here on the Tech Glow Up. That's right, Katie Tucker, Global Customer Research and CX Insights Manager for General Motors on the Tech Glow Up. Amazing. Hello, and welcome to the Tech Glow Up. Today, I am thrilled to be talking with Katie Tucker, the Global Customer Research CX Insights Manager for General Motors. Katie, it is such a delight to talk with you today. Thanks for joining me on the Tech Glow Up.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Oh my goodness. Those who listen to the Tech Glow Up know that I talk a lot about how you can learn so much from your customers, that you can take products from great ideas into wildly successful ones, that oftentimes like the work that it takes to do those things isn't as hard as we might tell ourselves. What these listeners don't know, Katie, and maybe you don't either, is that the learning that I got to do early in my design thinking career, watching some of the things that you were doing over a decade ago, it was really a foundation for that. I just have to let you know that I'm so thrilled to be chatting with you today. And so thank you.
Oh, it's so wonderful, and the feeling is mutual. So great to be back.
So, Katie, I'm so excited to talk to
Yeah.
you, but I think what everybody wants to hear is your introduction. So, can you please introduce yourself and the work that you do with this very fascinating title as a global customer research and CX insights manager for General
Yeah.
Motors?
I'll start off by introducing myself with a couple of things that no matter what role I've had and where I've been, have been true to the work that I do. And it's always been centered around kind of new technology adoption, but in a human-centered design way, right? And that's what brings me to CX. So at General Motors, I've had a couple of different positions. Before that, I ran a small boutique consulting agency for about 5 years, and a couple of other large businesses, large corporations that I worked at before that. And everything kind of comes down to that. At General Motors, it's all about taking the customer insights that we get, very data rich. We have a lot of quantitative data. I love digging in and getting qualitative data and letting those two kind of dance and inform each other. But the research isn't the end of it. It's what do we do with that then? Who needs to know? How do we make strategic decisions based on this? How do we make sometimes fast changes, sometimes more structural changes? So it's kind of the summary of the work that I do.
Amazing. And in this role, are you answering broad questions across the organization, or is there like a focus problem space that you're currently diving into?
So I think anybody who's spent time in large organizations knows that it's very easy to fall into, I have this role, and for every task, there's a different person because there's just so many people that work there, right? And I've been really lucky to have a role that kind of lets me fly at a couple of different altitudes. Sometimes the customer insights inform future product vision. So we're 5 years out. Sometimes we're talking about, a vehicle that's launching in 3 months. And, here's a thing that we either need to fix or we need to highlight or a new aha that needs to be activated. So I've been pretty fortunate in that way.
I love the idea of a new aha that needs to be activated on. Is there an example that you might be able to share of uncovering an organizational aha and like how you go about like socializing that and sharing it and like turning it into action at an org the size of the one of GM?
I'd say when I first joined GM, it was about 4 years ago, and it was right as their line of new electric vehicles were rolling off. We had about these that rolled out in the portfolio within a couple of years of each other. So with that new technology adoption, there was a lot that our customers were going to learn and need to learn, and there was a lot that we needed to help prepare them to learn. So how do people charge? When do they charge? When is it important to have navigation that it's a different need. One of my favorite ahas that we had, it's really easy to kind of proximity test. We had a fleet of Blazer EVs that went out across the country. It was a 2-week road trip with 40 vehicles and 80 drivers or more. And we gave them some rough routes and said, let's go learn about what your experience is like. What was really striking is the differences of our customer needs when they were in a road trip condition with unfamiliar territory and kind of an extreme use case. Maybe the stress is a little bit higher, for a variety of different reasons. But, and for any reason, we've got all the context that people bring with them to try to understand why it's important for them to get accurate information immediately. The importance of that was not the same when people were driving around in their regular daily commute, right? Where we know our roads, we know where we're going to go. I've got 3 chargers I like to go to, and if I don't hit one, I'll hit the other one, right? And so I think that aha was, it was kind of right before launch, but it did kind of change the way that it kind of gave some context to how we talk about the different values that we provide in the vehicle.
Oh, I had like horror flashbacks as you were talking about that, right? Like the conditions where the customers are using your tool might like dramatically impact how they feel about it. I have some strong memories of working on an augmented reality platform that was very easy to use in our office, But when you were out in the field on top of a house trying to use the same features, those particular users wouldn't call it fast and easy. Might be
Yeah.
Katie, what sparked like doing customer insights, translating it for an enterprise company, helping, large and diverse teams adopt technologies in ways that actually deliver pretty significant, value to these companies. Those are outcomes of a long and successful career. Where did you start on this journey, bringing design and insights and innovation together like this? Can you take
Yeah.
us back to the origin?
I'll start by saying this is a story of one, right? So, if you want to be a neurosurgeon, there's a very defined path of what you'd have to do this, right? I've worked with wonderful CX professionals who have psychology backgrounds, who have design backgrounds, who have business back, right? It can kind of come in a lot of different ways. So for me in particular, I was brought up in design by way of architecture, big A architecture, like buildings in the built environment. And yeah, and that was incredibly gratifying. One of my favorite ways to think about the work that I was doing was like, how does a building become a good neighbor and how does it serve the neighborhood around it? Right. It's there, it's going to be there hopefully for 100 years. How might it, increase activity, like physical activity and connection and bring out all these, good, healthy attributes that you want in a neighborhood. So I think there is really, really where I learned about, kind of having to do the research. If you go into a neighborhood, every neighborhood has its own culture and its own identity. You can't just learn from the kind of looking on the internet. You have to go there and you have to talk to people and you have to go to a coffee shop, right? So that was a part of it. When I went back to grad school and I got my master's, I graduated into a recession. And so there was like big props to all my architecture friends who landed jobs during that time. It was really tough. And I had a young family. We moved across the country with my new husband and my new baby. And I was at this moment where I was trying to figure out what I was going to do next. And I knew about myself that it was fairly, I was comfortable talking to other architects and designers about, maybe the value of design and the importance of what we were doing, but I didn't really have the business language around it. I went back and I got my MBA at Portland State University. And in there, I took all of my electives in new product development, had a wonderful mentor who was my human-centered innovation professor, and we ended up collaborating and doing some classes together after that. It was just a really, really wonderful time. And so that's where I learned that there was kind of like a canon around the things that we were learning that wasn't just in architecture, but it was around at the time design thinking, human-centered innovation, and that's kind of grown into CX. So I think that's the origin story.
I realize, Katie, I'm always very flexible with terms. And I think your role and title kind of poses a very interesting, it is an interesting mix because oftentimes like design and innovation and customer experience are like siloed, right? Like those are full different departments. And I'm curious, can you talk a little bit about in your role, like how those ideas come together and sort of the organization that you're working in with there? I think, a lot of times the idea is like VX is the people who deal with the problems after the fact, and to have this like proactive design component to it seems pretty forward for where I think a lot of folks might suppose a product org is organized.
There are always going to be silos, and there are always going to be people who are kind of like knocking holes in those silos. It is always in all of my work that I've done, kind of cross-functional collaboration has been a foundational pillar to finding success. In my current role, there are some silos that we have to break down. I think what's really wonderful right now about where General Motors is they also have this, I think probably in like the last 3 or 4, maybe 5 years, have this really new excitement around coalescing around the customer's experience. Although functionally and the way that we've always done things might feel like you do this and you do this and you do that, I think that cognitively, and then, that leads to behaviorally, we have more and more people who are actively working to say, hey, I see this thing over here. How does that impact what you're doing? Or are you seeing it over there? And so I think what's really important, if I could offer one piece of suggestion, is if you find yourself in, trying to get over to another side, it's easy to get, I'm too busy to talk to you right now, but keep working at it and you'll find the person who's like, oh, I've been looking for you and I didn't know that you were here. Let's have this conversation now. And then you just start, finding your people and building your kind of internal network of people kind of working cross-functionally. And and that kind of energy is contagious. It really is. And I think that's been the best thing that I've experienced so far.
At least from the outside, what I have seen as an observer, that skill of getting those cross-functional teams excited about something that like maybe was off their radar is one of your superpowers. Like it is something that like you have the patience, the ability to bring people on board, to meet people where they are. Do you have like a secret sauce for that? Is it an approach? Is there a methodology, or is it really, a case by case basis of who your stakeholders and collaborators are?
I think it's like anything. It comes with practice. And the more you practice, the less you have to. So I'll say a couple of things, but if you try to do it all at once, first time, it's going to feel overwhelming. I think one thing is really trying to understand who's in the room, right? What projects are important? What is motivating them? Where are their challenges? Where are their pressures, right? It's also about, I like to think of being open or like open-mindedness is like somebody's propensity to absorb information or take in how somebody is feeling and let that change them or change their direction. And so I always try to lead with being open so that I'm actively engaging and like you said, kind of meeting people where they're at and helping to find that common ground. I mean, sometimes, quite frankly, it's one part mediation, but it's just how, we have to have these conversations to get to the good place. And so depending on the topic, sometimes it's really easy and it's fun and sometimes it's challenging and we're talking about, trade-offs and who's going to make which concessions and for what reason. So it just takes a lot of patience and practice, making sure that everybody in the room is one, engaging right. If somebody's not engaging right, then we have to make the environment right for everybody else. But if everybody's there wholeheartedly engaged, the rest is just kind of figuring out how to make the ingredients work together.
I love that. I'd love, if you're able, can you share, when the data has brought new information, whether either as an opportunity or a challenge, like how do you like to, socialize these things, bring people on board and, direct people to, to grow and change as the data indicates?
So I think it's, the more methodologies we use to understand a situation, the richer the picture, the more complete the picture is. So oftentimes we'll see, if we're looking at some kind of, let me back up. My wheelhouse and where I typically engage is on the qualitative side, like I said before. And so sometimes we'll get, a small sample. We have a small sample size to work from and we get, an insight, maybe 2 out of 8 people or, found this or, 15 out of 30 or 45 found this, right? So it's like, well, this isn't like, it's a really small sample size. And so there's all these reasons why we could kind of explain it away, but we shouldn't do that, right? So we kind of take note and say, okay, here are some stories that we're collecting. And then we go into the data and say, you know, these are the behaviors that we've observed. If we can kind of classify or understand those behaviors, whether it's the way that somebody is, connecting their phone via Bluetooth or the process that they go through something, is there something that was special about this group? Or is this actually representative of what's going out in the real world? And so then that's where we'll ask our quant people and say, hey, let's look at, we have a wonderful like voice of the customer team that kind of listens to what people are saying. We have great behavioral analytics that we can kind of look at how people are either like connecting or using their vehicle, right? And so then how do we bring all these conversations together and say, hey, I have a hunch. Our data, our qualitative data is, telling us that we have maybe something that we should pay attention to. And a lot of times what happens is with the new users of this kind of phone, we have in fact actually found that we're experiencing this kind of issue. And what the qualitative data has pulled up is usually when we have not like a mass market issue, but something that might be a little bit more niche. Maybe if we're talking, just to keep the example going, if we're talking about phone connection, maybe it's, if we're talking about, I love Title, I'm a Title user. So if if we have a group of people, sometimes we only have one or two Title users that we're talking to. And so, in the big data, it doesn't really bubble up, but that's our opportunity to say, hey, can we filter this out and just like look at this group and see what's going on? So that might be a good example. And then sometimes what we find over there kind of reinforms how we might do more qualitative research next.
Even just like the culture of curiosity, of bringing different behaviors, different questions to these different teams, and engaging with a question. You were noting when you were talking through some of your process of especially in the architecture years of really like you kept using your how might we questions, and I think it can be so powerful to really flip the how do we technology into how might we drive these values, drive these engagements, be delightful rather than starting with some of those point solutions of all of this. The show is called The Tech Glow Up, and that's kind of like your job is figuring out how to make technology better, faster, more impactful. I'm curious, do you have a 6-month goal that you're working on to elevate or transform the work that you're doing?
Yeah. Can I answer this in two ways?
Love it.
So I think there's this like internal structural goal, right, that I'm working on. And this is really about, we're a company that has multiple platforms, multiple brands, multiple configurations. And sometimes, something that we learn over here kind of goes back to these people who are working on it, but really can be impactful broader. And so the work that I do is really focused on I have my common time windows are 3 to 6 months out, right? How can and those are those AHA that we need to activate right before launch. And then also like, how do we kind of bring this back to the people who are looking 5 years out and also and across platforms, right? So we're always trying to find better ways of doing things and evolving as a practice. And so, I'm really excited to be engaged in how do we evolve our research and development practices to be closer together and more informative and really activate those insights. Some places that I've seen research, it's been kind of like, okay, this is my homework and now I get to go do the thing. What I'm really excited to do is take all of those insights and how do we be there when you need to have that and develop together at the same time. So I think from a customer perspective, where I get a lot of excitement and where I'd love to see some glowing up would be really in those moments where it's really like we call it like the onboarding space, but when you first receive your vehicle, or maybe it's a new update in your vehicle. And we as a company have an opportunity to say, how do we get invested in your life? And a big part of that is helping people understand these new technologies in a fast and intuitive way. So it doesn't feel like laborious or frustrating or right. And so whether we're talking about autonomous driving, we're talking about AI in vehicle, or we're talking about, your EV life or just your new infotainment system, really getting those first 60, 90 days is really, really important.
As a major purchase, a lifestyle product, something that people are in every day, similar to that first getting to know you period in a job, right? You want to make sure that you set good expectations. You want to make sure that you're
Yeah.
following through on why they got you into the room already. Like, just to follow up, because those were so delightful, if I could hand you a magic wand and you could wave it and erase something that is in your way toward those glow ups, what would you boop
Oh my
out of
God.
existence?
I think it'd be like things that are part of like the human condition, like time. Like, could we just have more time? Could we like be multiple places at once? Can we just change physics? Can I use my magic wand to change the space-time continuum? I think that there's just, it's we have to live within the constraints that we're in, and I think that on the work front, technology that's actually helping us to do some of those things, right? You and I are able to talk across the country, and we're able to do research the same way. So maybe the magic wand is developing, but I think it's just, there's so much to do, and it's so hard sometimes to say, this is the thing that I need to bring to this person right now. It takes a lot of discovery and exploration and finding the right book, so that sometimes you have to bring them along for the journey, so that they understand the context of the insights that you're delivering. But I don't have a great answer for that, but
I think that's a fabulous answer because I was asking for a quick fix and you're like, Nathan, like this work is the process. Like this work is bringing people along. And right, like if if the show is looking to get great advice from leaders who have seen it and done it all, this idea that like you will have to make choices, are always working in constraints. And so to pick your battles and to be focused and to be, opportunistic where you're able, like, hell yeah, like we don't need a wand is like a great answer.
a great summary.
So you alluded to this earlier, but I really have found that asking innovators and entrepreneurs about the role of mentors and guides and coaches just always delivers fantastic stories. So, right, like no innovator, no person working in digital transformation does this stuff alone. And sometimes that push of like, do it, try it, I believe in you, can mean so much when it comes from the right source. Can you talk about how mentors or coaches have helped you on your journey to where you are today?
Yeah, I'll say that, you know, finding a good mentor and finding a good coach. I don't know if this is a shared experience, but I've only had a couple of just like maybe falling in love. There's only a couple really good ones in your life, right? That, make the real change. And there's great people along the way. I have wonderful colleagues. I have wonderful network of people that support me along the way. But there have been a couple that have made real substantial changes to how I feel about my work, and have pushed me. I guess I mentioned earlier about a professor that I had at Portland State, who really saw and believed in the way that I approach work, and kind of brought me under his wing, and we kind of built some things together. And through that, it provided a lot of confidence, a history of work that he could pull from. And he was able to give me confidence in, I guess, maybe how I differentiate myself, right? And where there's value that sometimes, if you live with the value that you have, you don't realize that it might be different or unique from, what else might be out there. I was working full time and also going to school. And then I also started teaching. And so like all of these things were happening kind of at the same time. And what was really important was that I was able to kind of live in the working world, and I was living in the university world, and I was bringing kind of the mentorship that I was getting from people together and letting that inform me. So it wasn't one person telling me one thing or providing one kind of, help or insight for me, but it was kind of, I was open to it. And so I was absorbing it everywhere I was. So that's one thing. And then the other thing I'll say is I've always kind of dipped in and out of like adjuncting through working, and it's been incredibly fulfilling for me. One, because, I can like be around students and help, I like thinking about their future careers, but selfishly, it gives me a great outlet to kind of think in a different way and to explain in a different way. And through having those conversations, I've found, kind of unofficial mentorship or insights from even like my students in my classroom.
I love that you have your own sort of qualitative research group of mentors. Katie, we've made it to the speed round. Are you ready?
Mhm. Okay, I'm ready.
So if
I
there
need a
were
buzzer or
one
something.
notes for future episodes, if there is one key takeaway that listeners walk away from our chat today with, in one sentence, what should that be?
Stay curious, listen, be open to change, adjust.
Heck yeah. So you mentioned a little bit of this earlier, but I'm a nerd about strategic planning. We're at the end of quarter 1 as we're talking now. Where is your strategic planning brain?
Strategic planning for my role and how I'm trying to find success is really about, so I've kind of taken a new role in research. So still CX, but, different toolbox, different network. So my strategic brain is really about building up that new and kind of growing and from on the top of an existing network and really trying to understand how and, find like-minded, like working folks that, want to take this journey with me.
Amazing. And I'm curious, do you have a spicy soundbite to share? Possibly a hot take on technology, trends, CX, or beyond?
Technology is only valuable if it serves the humans that use it.
And Katie, lastly, if people want to know more about your work, how can they follow up and learn more?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm not very active on social media, but I am on LinkedIn and I am always open for a conversation. So reach out LinkedIn, Catherine period M period Tucker. I think it's what it says.
Katie, we have done it. It always goes so fast when the conversations are so juicy and interesting. Thank you. They say don't meet your heroes, but I've never found that to be true. The work that you do, not only surfacing these aha moments for some of the largest companies and manufacturers in the world, I have found astounding forever, but the grounded, curious, collaborative way that you bring people along for that journey and get them invested, I think is just a masterclass that almost anyone who's trying to work in technology and innovation transformation could learn a whole lot from. It has been a true delight to chat with you today. Thanks again for joining me on the Tech Glow Up.
Thanks for the wonderful, thoughtful questions and so happy to be here with you.
Can I ask you a favor? If you really enjoyed this episode, could you share it on your Instagram stories or maybe post the link with what you enjoyed on LinkedIn? The sort of sharing and engaging really helps small podcasters like me reach the audience that I know really cares about these kinds of conversations. If you've made it this far in the podcast, I really appreciate you. Thanks for listening. Please make sure to like and subscribe so that you never miss an episode of the Tech Glow Up. And hey, can I ask you a favor? If you really enjoyed this episode, could you share it on your Instagram stories or maybe post the link with what you enjoyed on LinkedIn? The sort of sharing and engaging really helps small podcasters like me reach the audience that I know really cares about these kinds of conversations.